Θα ήθελα και εγώ να ευχαριστήσω κάποιους ανθρώπους τώρα, πριν ξεκινήσουμε με την πρώτη κεντρική ομιλία της ημέρας. Όπως είπε η κυρία Λιπάκη, η Οργανωτική Επιτροπή στην Ελληνική Εταιρεία Μεταφρασεολογίας αποτελούνταν από τον κύριο Σίμω Γραμμενίδη, ο οποίος είναι μαζί μας εδώ σήμερα, και την κυρία Σταυρούλα Σοκόλη, η οποία δυστυχώς δεν μπόρεσε να είναι εδώ, αλλά στέλνει τους θερμούς χαιρετισμούς της. Και φυσικά θα ήθελα να ευχαριστήσω τους ανθρώπους που βοήθησαν όλο αυτό το διάστημα να οργανωθεί αυτή η ημερίδα από το Τμήμα Ξένων Γλωσσών Μετάφρασης και Ερμηνείας του Ιονίου Πανεπιστημίου, την Οργανωτική Επιτροπή λοιπόν του τμήματός μας. Χωρίς την άοκνη προσπάθειά τους και τον ενθουσιασμό τους, δεν θα ήμασταν εδώ σήμερα, δεν θα είχε οργανωθεί αυτή η ημερίδα. Ευχαριστώ λοιπόν την κυρία Σταυρούλα Γράιλα, τον κύριο Σταύρο Κοζοπόλη, την κυρία Μαρία Τσίκου, την κυρία Μαρία Γεωργίου και όλη τη φοιτητική ομάδα του FLTI Voice, τους υπέροχους εθελοντές και τις εθελόντριές μας, φοιτητές και φοιτήτριες του Τμήματος Ξένων Γλωσσών Μετάφρασης και Ερμηνείας, τον κύριο Μιχάλη Διμελή, την κυρία Αλεξάνδρα Καποπούλου, την κυρία Ράνια Μουσδράκα, την κυρία Αναστασία Παπανδραφίλη, τον κύριο Μάριο Χρυσούλα, την κυρία Ευγενία Καλιόρα, την κυρία Κωνσταντίνα Αγαπητού, το τεχνικό της Ιονίου Ακαδημίας, κύριο Νίκο Μουστάκα, και τον Δημήτρη Ματσούκα, φοιτητή του Τμήματος Μεταφραστικών Σπουδών, για την πολύτιμη βοήθειά του σήμερα στο τεχνικό κομμάτι. Θα ήθελα να ευχαριστήσω επίσης και εγώ τον κύριο Στέφανο Βλαχόπουλο για το συντονισμό της διερμηνείας. Δεν θα αναφέρω πάλι τα ονόματα των διερμηνέων μας, που κάνουν εξαιρετική δουλειά. Θα ήθελα να ευχαριστήσω τέλος τους καταπληκτικούς χορηγούς μας, χωρίς την βοήθεια των οποίων δεν θα μπορούσε να είχε διοργανωθεί σε πρακτικό επίπεδο αυτή η ημερίδα, την Πανελλήνια Ένωση Επαγγελματιών Μεταφραστών αποφύτων του Ιουνίου Πανεπιστημίου, την Πανελλήνια Ένωση Μεταφραστών, την Εταιρεία Όρκο, τη Σχολή Μετάφραση, το Ροδαριανό Όμιλο Κέρκυρας, το Δικηγορικό Σύλλογο Κέρκυρας, την Εταιρεία Φούτος Κέλτερινγκ, το κανάλι Κορφού News, το πόρταλ ενημέρωσης Συνδετήρας, το ραδιοφωνικό σταθμό Κύμα FM και φυσικά την Black Dogs Production που βρίσκονται εδώ μαζί μας για την βιντεοσκόπηση και τη φωτογράφηση της ημερίδας. Υπενθυμίζω ότι μετά το πέρας της ημερίδας θα χρειαστούμε λίγο χρόνο για να επεξεργαστούμε τα βίντεο και θα αναρτηθούν στο κανάλι του τμήματός μας στο YouTube. Ευχαριστώ από καρδιάς βεβαίως όλους εσάς που ανταποκριθήκατε με μεγάλο ενθουσιασμό στην πρόσκλησή μας να έρθετε στην Κέρκυρα διαζώσεις και να παρακολουθήσετε τις εργασίες της ημερίδας. Σας ευχαριστούμε πολύ και ευχόμαστε και ο καιρός να σας αποζημιώσει. Μπορούμε λοιπόν τώρα να ξεκινήσουμε χωρίς άλλη καθυστέρηση με την πρώτη κεντρική ομιλία της ημέρας. Έχω τη μεγάλη χαρά να καλέσω στο βήμα τον πολύ καλό συνάδελφο και πρόεδρο του Ινστιτούτου Μεταφραστικών Σπουδών του Πανεπιστημίου του Καρόλου και μέλος του Συμβουλίου του Δικτύου EMP, κύριο Τόμаш Svoboda, ο οποίος είναι εδώ για να μας μιλήσει για τα προφίλ των μεταφραστών στα θεσμικά όργανα, σε διεθνείς οργανισμούς και τις αλλαγές που βιώνει αυτός ο τομέας. Κύριε Svoboda, το βήμα σας.
Επιτρέψτε μου να σας ευχαριστήσω όλους για αυτή την ευγενική πρόσκληση. Είναι πραγματική ευχαριστήση να βρίσκομαι εδώ σε αυτό το όμορφο νησί. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Wilhelmini, for inviting me to this conference. Dear distinguished guests, dear academics, dear professionals, dear institution representatives, dear students, I have a very heartfelt contact and passion, emotion for Greece, especially the Ionian Islands. My family and I have spent very many summer seasons in the Isle of Zakynthos, but also in Corfu. So it gives me a genuine pleasure to be here, this time in a different capacity, which I'm immensely enjoying. I will be talking about a possible shift that I am calling tectonic shift, perhaps, In the area of institutional translation, institutional translator profiles, when it comes to the specific area of technology. I have prepared a comparative study, a meta-study, so to speak, and I have tried to compare 5 documents, 5 areas of description that talk about the translators' profiles. First one to compare, first material, will be a comparison of a quite recent document by the Directorate General for Translation of the European Commission, which will be abbreviated DGT. It is a profile that was in a draft form launched last year, 2022. And I will compare this draft profile with the European Masters in Translation Competence Framework. I will compare the DGT document with the EMT 2017 version of the framework. I will explain more in a minute. Then I'd like to have a look at the development over time between the European Masters in Translation Competence Framework of 2017 compared to the most recent version of 2022. I'd like to focus then on the approach taken by the Directorate General for Translation European Commission, which was presented in a book recently published with Routledge. I will also delve into the recent approach taken by the European Parliament. However, I know that the Director General of the European Parliament's Translation Service will definitely address the topic as well, and perhaps in more detail. And fifthly, I'd like to cover the approach taken by the United Nations Translation and Interpreting Service. So my approach, my study, is a meta-survey of all those 5 approaches. However, to keep a certain focus, but because otherwise the study would be too broad, I decided to focus on technology-related competences, and obviously we're staying in the area of institutional translation. So all I'm saying will relate to institutional translation. As a disclaimer, I'd like to say, firstly, that I'm not referring to literary translation, and I'm not speaking about other fields of technical translation. I'd like to specifically address institutional translation. But we'll see if the findings can be further applied to other fields as well. I have referred to a recent book, which is mentioned here in the second place. It's a book co-edited by Wilhelmini Sossoni, myself, and Lucia Biel. It appeared last year, and Walter Mavic is also one of the contributors. It's called Institutional Translator Training, and by the way, it's accessible open access. It's available open access, so feel free to have a look at the book. I don't know if it's ethical to refer to one's own work and make PR to it, but I guess it's fine with all of you. So this is what the book looks like, and as I said, the entire PDF is available for download. Also recently, there is Fernando Prieto Ramos and Speradmillo's publication in a collective monograph called Institutional Translation and Interpreting, Assessing Practices and Managing for Quality. Obviously, there may be other publications, such as articles, also in other languages, which perhaps are not accessible to me. So this is just a preview of what is perhaps the most recent research in the area. So let us have a look at the first comparison. And as I said, I'd like to compare a DGT draft document of last year and an EMT framework version 2017. The DGT draft profile, translator profile, was introduced in November 2021, and it was detailing plans to launch a new competence profile in DGT. Jeroen Asposla presented the profile at a Translating Europe workshop at that time, and what he presented and what the document consists of is this very interesting system, so to speak, a wheel of competences that maps individual competences and puts them onto a wheel-like map. For those of you who are familiar with the EMT competence framework of 2017 and before, you may see that the famous wheel of competences adopted by the EMT in 2009 was adapted by the DGT document as well, which, however, turned it into an even more elaborated exercise in that it plots individual competences that you can see as those number references in the shape. It plots the individual competences into those separate sections of the wheel. So not only do we have competences when I go clockwise, competence number 2, language and culture, competence 4, technology, service provision, personal, interpersonal terminology, and translation. Not only do we have those sections, the specific competences are then plotted individually in those spheres around the very core, and the spheres refer to 3 levels of severity. The first, closest to the core, to the very core, called Competences Profile Translators, is actually called core. That's the dark blue sphere. Then you have the key competences, or the key severity level. And then, as a periphery, you have the supplementary competences level. So this was the DGT draft, the DGT document. As a disclaimer again, this is not a finalized version. I was informed that DGT has halted the development of the competences profile for the time being. But anyway, for our comparison, it could serve well to see what DGT last year considered important and how it compares to the EMT framework, which it derives from, and which I'm going to be referring to right now. You may be familiar with the European Masters in Translation Competence Framework. It was developed in 2009 in its first version. The first version had a similar structure as this one, a wheel of competences, but not so elaborate. In 2017, there was a major overhaul, and we no longer refer to a wheel of competences, but to the system of inner connected clocks to show that there's not a notion of center and periphery, but that all the competences that are involved actually work together to make things move and work. So that was the major 2017 overhaul, and just recently last year there was a new version launched with some minor changes. If you'd like to learn more about the EMT framework competences, please feel free to refer to Nicolas Ferliger, Alexandra Krause, and Lena Salmi's chapter in the book Institutional Translator Training that I was referring to earlier. Nicolas Colliger and Alexandra Krause are actually one of the authors of the initial ENT competence framework. So this is what we'll be comparing the DGT document with on the level of technology. To perhaps give a few more hints in the sense of why should we consider the DGT document, why should we consider the ENT document as relevant ones. We know that DGT terms itself as the leading organization in terms of institutional translation and major employer of translators in the EU. Obviously, the European Parliament is also a major player here. DGT collaborates with the academia through the ENT network, for example, the European Parliament also through the SCIC and through the interpretation masters. DGT collaborates with the industry through the group that is called LIND, Language Industry Group. It says that DGT pioneered a number of services in the area of translation, such as its workflow platform Tradesk. They pioneered with capital integration and the European Commission and European institutions machine translation system, e-translation. It's probably the largest translation service in the world, and it has major ambitions, such as for the period 2020-2024, to remain at the front of language technology and keep exploring new approaches to using data-driven language technology and working methods. So that's why it's a good idea to look at the DGT document, and why to look at the ENT document. ENT reference framework has been, or the competence framework has been termed as a point of reference in translation education and training, and it was also referred to as a suitable basis of a CPD framework, for example. So now, a few details as regards the methodology of the comparison. I contrasted each competence, individual competence, among the technology competences from both the documents. And I could see that you get three types of relations between the two documents. On the one hand, it's full overlap. You can also get a partial overlap, but also there are matches or overlaps that have zero representation in one document or the other. This is how my comparison table looked like. It was pretty elaborate, and I don't want to go into the details right here, but as you can see, we have the technology categories on the left-hand side. I took the DGT document as the lead document, and I plotted or compared this document to the ENT framework, which then appeared in the second column, and I put some comments into the third column. As for the findings, it was important to distinguish the three severity levels. As I said, the ENT framework tries to refrain from the core and periphery notion. So I could see that the DGT document still considered this distinction important. So I also distinguished between the core, key, and supplementary severity level competences in my comparison. So looking at the core severity level competences in the technology area, I could see that there was almost entirely a full match under the 5 competencies that are mentioned there. So out of the 5, just 1 showed a partial match. So the full match was that the DGT document fully took over the ENT's description of the ENT framework in terms of web translation, translation technology usage, mastering office software, for example, and translation workflow. As for the partial match, we could see that terminology research competence and is somewhat more emphasized in the DGT document. I could really see that terminology focus is among the technology-related categories a major one, which shows that DGT really puts a big focus on terminology specifically. So the partial match doesn't mean that one or the other document lacks reference to this, but here it means that the EMT framework puts less emphasis on terminology. The DGT document puts more emphasis on terminology, which is perhaps understandable given the institutional context. When it comes to the key severity levels, let me remind you that this is the second sphere, the lightish, the not so dark blue sphere. The key severity level says that the DGT document showed substantial agreement with the competence areas as represented in the EMT framework. Substantial agreement. From the 7 K-level categories, 2 match fully and the rest show partial agreement. So the match is not so profound as it was in the core competences, but it's still large. When it comes to technology competence, the DGT document adds no categories beyond those that had been part of the EMT framework, which is very interesting considering that DGT document comes 5 years after the EMT framework was launched. So I really compared the DGT 2022 document with the EMT 2017 version, and you really could see that this EMT version, the EMT document, was very future-proof, so to speak, so that the DGT services, 5 years on, had no need or saw no need to add any categories beyond those that had already been mentioned. And the third level, the less severe, the supplementary levels, I could see that here there was the most profound mismatch among the two documents. Out of the 20 sub-competences, I could only see a full match within 3, which is corpus management, translation technology research, and translation project management. And the rest showed partial match or even 0 matches. So for the partial match, we can see that the DGT document develops in one way or another the following competences mentioned in the EMT framework: translation technology sector intelligence, translation technology development, terminology technology sector, terminology technology research, terminology technology development, terminology extraction. It's very much about terminology, as you can see. Terminology workflow management, terminology project management, and corporate general project management methodology and tools. So you can find those areas in both documents. They overlap to a certain extent. But there were those 0 matches, meaning that the DGT document actually adds, 5 years on after the EMT framework, adds the following technology-linked competences: artificial intelligence fundamentals, computer science fundamentals, computer programming, computational linguistics, corpus linguistics, IT project management, the provision of translation technology training, and the provision of terminology technology training. So consider that the DGT services saw a need to refer to new areas of competence in terms of technology for their in-house institutional translators. And I'd like to specifically point out the last 2. The document really says that it is expected from an in-house DGT translator it's a supplementary field, so it's nice to have. It's not a core competence, but it's still, it would be nice for a future DGT translator to show the ability to provide translation terminology training and terminology technology training. Apart from the comparison contrast exercise, I also had a look into the content in more general terms. I could see, interestingly, that the notion of machine translation seems far less represented in the DGT 2022 document as opposed to at least 4 explicit mentions found in the EMT framework. So the DGT mentions MT, machine translation, less than the EMT framework did 5 years ago. Why is that? Why can it be that in 2022, a DGT internal document just doesn't refer to machine translation so much? My view is that MT is a commonplace today in the area of specialized translation and is taken for granted. So to conclude this first comparison, first step, so to speak, from the 7 K-level categories, 2 match fully and the remaining ones show partial agreement, and we could see about the core categories that there was more or less a full match. As for the supplementary severity entries, these are those that the match was the least, and there are entries such as artificial intelligence fundamentals and computer programming. We could see that there is a shift toward appreciating advanced technology skills as a nice-to-have component. For the new additions, the capacity to train fellow translators was added. So the DGT document lacks the following. The DGT document lacks the following. Audiovisual translation, pre-editing, or ergonomics, interestingly. The DGT document highlights data protection and intellectual property rights. Here I'd like to comment that I compared the DGT document with the EMT framework version 2017. And as I said, recently, last year, the EMT framework was made a new version. So we will see that in the EMT document, here it shouldn't read DGT 2022, but EMT 2022. In the newer version of EMT, data literacy was added among the expected competencies. And DGT document introduces the following: translation technology testing, translation and terminology training, as I said. Okay, my impression from the quite laborious comparison was that the DGT document presents no actual paradigm shift as regards technology. The technology component in institutional translators' competence profiles and toolbox, but I think it shows an example of a new competence framework that shows a shift in the notion of technology and its role in a translator's profile. So from a traditional translation technology user to technology operator manager, this could be one of the areas to shift, and even perhaps programmer or consultant. And the shift seems not to be very fast, to be abrupt. As I said, the DGT document is a work in progress. Now, let's have a look at the second step, where I compared the 2017 EMT framework version to the most recent EMT document. It may be interesting for translation studies departments representatives, those who might consider applying for European Masters in Translation membership, because they will need to address those competences that are featured in the EMT 2022 document. And perhaps looking at the development 5 years on, 2017-2022, we will be able to see what the new focus is. So, as I said, I was focusing on the technology aspect here in my meta survey, and I can share a compared version of the 2017 EMT document with the 2022 EMT document. And here you will be able to see some of the changes. I will refer briefly to the general ones. So number one, it's a minor update, as I said. Number two, in terms of technology, very interestingly, it says technology has an ever-increasing impact on the way translation services are performed over time. Its limits have also become more apparent. So that's the wording of the 2022 framework. Interestingly, we seem to be in a time where, let's hope so, the hype or the peak of the hype has subsided, and we hope that the limits have become more apparent, that the limits of technology. So we should not be overstating the importance of technology. Another statement added to the 2022 version, this updated framework reflects the need for these human skills by etc. So what we tried in the EMT was to show the importance of human skills. And human skills as a differentiator in a technologized employment market. So, the 2022 framework is meant to be available for the period of 2023 to 2028, for the coming period, for the coming EMT selection period. And now I will turn to the technology competence specifically again, which is competence number 4. And here we will see that this new phrase was added. This competence includes all the knowledge and skills used to implement and advise on the use of present and future translation technologies within the translation process. So the notion of advisory, consultancy perhaps, was added to the introduction to the technology catalog. Further additions include critically assessing relevance of IT applications, the introduction or new mention of QA, quality assurance tools. It is required for the translation programs that apply for EMT membership to show that their graduates understand the basics of MT systems. Don't know if you can see it, but formally the 2017 version said master the basics of MT systems. So now we were more down to earth and we said it's important for the graduates to understand the basics of MT and their impact on the translation process. Further, the EMT institutes are expected to train their students and graduates to be able to integrate MT into a translation workflow. And, as I mentioned already, the data literacy aspect was added to the catalog. So this is a brief survey of the changes in the 2022 EMT framework. So step number 3, let's have a look at the most recent publication and summary of DGT's approach. We've been referring to the DGT 2022 document, meaning the work in progress, the draft version of the in-house translator profile document so far. But this was not presented as an official commission or DGT situation or reality. What is there and what is official is the statement made by Maria, DGT's director of one of the directorates, who contributed her chapter Translation-Related CPD, Continued Professional Development at the European Commission, again in the book that I referred to earlier. And her chapter, Merit Anna Ilya, describes DGT's approach to continued professional training. She starts off with showing the DGT CAT architecture in DGT. And she goes on to say that DGT have introduced a train-the-trainer scheme. Skilled translators who are well-versed in technology can contribute to tools development. She also said that language technology, that there is a position specifically created for a language technology coordinator, one full-time member of staff in each language department to work on language technologies. And the director also says that DGT is currently working on bringing in a new profile, computational linguists. So you can see what we see in the DGT 2022 document, the draft document. It has its repercussions in the official statement as well. You could see the computational drive or the computational linguistics interest very much earlier. So here, Merit Anna Ilya talks about the Train-the-Trainer initiative and the fact that translators or the master trainers make significant contributions to a large portion of the suite of IT tools. The aspect of skills training can also be seen in this graph that she uses in the chapter. I'd like to point your attention to the bottom right corner where it says upskilling training in computational linguistics. So again, this is a CPD, a continued professional development scheme for DGT in-house translators. So upskilling training in computational linguistics is already very high on the agenda. So that was a summary of the DGT's most current approach and official approach. And let me now summarize European Parliament's approach, and I'm sorry to Walter to mention something that he's probably going to refer to as well, but I will be very brief. And it needs something, I think it fits well into the overall picture and the meta survey that I did. So thank you, Walter, for contributing your chapter Translation-Related CPD at the European Parliament. And from that, I take the following citations. DG tried to create a created a new family of 5 language professionals whose job is to present parliamentary topics in 3 formats: text, audio, and video. For our purposes, trying to survey the shifts, perhaps tectonic shifts, I took anything that in the new proposed portfolio in European Parliament in terms of competencies, everything that referred to technology, and I made an overview of the 5 new positions that Walter Mavic refers to in his chapter. And with each of the positions, I plotted or extracted references to IT-related expectations and training-related expectations. Those 5 positions or representatives are expected to help with development of communication and IT tools, help with development IT tools, etc., etc. So it reiterates in all the 5 job descriptions, helping to develop communication and IT tools. So again, consider positions such as legal language professionals, proofreaders, clear language professionals. They all are or will be expected to contribute to the development of IT tools. This is not mere translation business. This is very much beyond what translation was referred to earlier. And when it comes to expectations in terms of training, all the five new positions again show that also some capacity in training is expected, helping with training measures, helping with training, collaborating new colleagues, organization of relevant training, etc. So all 5 refer both to the help to develop IT tools and to be there when it comes to prepare training measures and events. Again, this is not basic translation business. This is much beyond the regular translation activity. So to summarize the European Parliament's approach, all the 5 new profiles are charged or deal with information technology and training aspect. And my last, this is the 5th step. The United Nations approach, again, allow me to cite from the book. This time it was authored by Anne Lefebvre, who is the head of United Nations Communication Department. She is responsible for translation and interpreting in the United Nations. The chapter is called Skills and Knowledge Required of Translators in Institutional Settings. And Anne Lefebvre says the following. What she did, she compared her survey of 2010, very influential by then, and she made a rerun of the survey 11 years on, and last year she presented the results in the book, so it's a very valuable piece of research. And the comparison reveals 3 significant changes, she says. This is a screenshot from the book. 3 significant changes in the skill set over the past decade, namely the increased relative importance of the following: contextual knowledge, the ability to make effective use of CAT tools, including recycled content and empty output, and thirdly, target language skills. So for our interest here, it's the technology aspect, which ranks second among the very important 3 areas that gained importance over the time. So I really like the longitudinal aspect of her research. She refers to institutional translation profiles, and she says among the 3 most important aspects is critically analyzing whatever the machine, meaning machine translation, came up with and decide if it's appropriate in a given context. So what is important here for us, thinking of shifts, tectonic shifts in translators' profiles, it's the aspect of critically analyzing. So the critical ability to see things from a distance. And she says, a commission representative who said, the future translator will be more of a curator than a creator. Curator of data, obviously, curator of machine-translated text. And another citations from her survey, Chief of Service at the United Nations headquarters put it this way: the main challenge for new entrants, new translators in post-editing machine-translated output, the main challenge is post-editing empty output without having accumulated experience as translators. Most translators now have to skip the translation step. So again, for us, it's the distance that you're taking when, or you should be taking when editing empty output. And she concludes that, again, poor target language skills and lack of critical distance were two of the three most oft-cited shortcomings of new recruits. So that's the end of my survey. So let me perhaps summarize some of the limitations and outlook of the research. Again, the research was concerned with institutional translation. We have to see to what extent these findings will inform future developments, in what extent we can say that they are transferable to other areas. But you are well familiar with the fact that DGT, European Parliament, have been the forerunners, have in very many aspects have shown the way forward. So what happens at the institutions should be of interest to everyone in the translation area. So the limitations, what I refer to as institutional translation and not EU translation is not everything when it comes to institutional translation, so to speak. So I was unable to refer to national institutions, for example. The DGT document 2022 that I referred to in the beginning is a work in progress. And again, we focus on a very specific field of technical translation, namely institutional translation. And among this niche area, again, on a very specific chapter of skills, and this is technology competence. So it was very minute and detailed, but perhaps we can draw some more general remarks. So here comes the summary of my meta-analysis with the 5 steps. In the first step, we can see that the DGT 2022 draft document adds, for example, meta levels such as translation technology training. If you're expected to train the others, you need to have a more general understanding of what's going on, not just very translation skills. And the second step, we could see the new version of the ENT framework, adding advisory capacity in the technology chapter. And the third step, looking at Ilya's chapter, she's talking about a train-the-trainer scheme and the fact that translators have to contribute to tools development, a notion that appears very profoundly in European Parliament's approach, where the new areas are expected to contribute to developing IT tools and training measures. And the United Nations approach showed that it is critical distance from text, from machine-translated text, that is key. So what do those findings show from the meta-analysis? are we witnessing a tectonic shift when it comes to translators' profiles? I think there appears to be a shift towards the meta level of translators' activity. To be able to reflect on what I'm doing, and perhaps not only sometimes reflect, but also share my reflections. So, the meta level. You could be thinking, there's a well-known anecdote that, you know, the translators who are very skilled in translating, what they do is professional translation. If you're not so good in translating, what do? You start training translators, you start teaching translation. I'm sorry for having a translation trainer here in the room. But if you're not very good in doing translation training, translator training, what do? You start writing about translation training. So this is not very nice message, and it's more of an anecdote. But what I would like to show here is this advancement on the meta levels that the anecdote is showing. There are those who actually translate, then there are those who train future translators, and there are those who actually consider implications for training, etc. So we have had that notion for very long now, but I think it now spills over to the entire profession. What I think is, what we're witnessing is a tectonic shift in the meta movement. And perhaps let me conclude with my final slide and implications. For researchers, you could have the meta approach. I think for researchers, it's a commonplace. What researchers do is reflecting on what's going on, etc. But perhaps we could have more meta-analysis. So analysis of analysis. So even in the meta area, you could have a meta-meta area. For trainers, trainers could highlight the consultancy aspect. Students, go ahead and include the meta level in your portfolio, meaning try to see if you can offer consultancy services as well. Practitioners, go ahead and do the same. Include the meta level in your portfolios. Institutional representatives of international organizations, why not foster the approach and provide further CPD in all the areas, but we could see that international organizations are at the forefront and they do a great job. Other institutions, such as national, regional, should perhaps think of introducing an approach, the approach, as part of their professionalization campaigns, and the industry could consider highlighting the aspect of meta movement in the services offering, perhaps including consultancy services. Here are my references, and Eucharisto.
Are there any questions? Now you have the chance to ask anything that you want Professor Svoboda to elaborate on. Ο κύριος Φλόρος, ελληνικά. Αγγλικά πες, ναι.
I thank you very much for the presentation of an extremely meticulous piece of work. For me, it was particularly important to know what the UN does, because we're used to looking at the EMT and DGT, but this falls out of scope, and you presented that, and I think it's very useful, particularly because they place emphasis also on this critical thing. So do you think this critical, this reference to critical, has to do with this human, what you refer to as more human aspects of the notion of competence?
Thank you for the question. I'm absolutely sure about that. I think that the critical capacity to critically assess everything what's there. It's not just perhaps the machine-translated output, but everything that is involved in the translation process. that this ability is a key competence, and perhaps for us, translator trainers, should always be the most important thing to have our students trained at. I think it has to do with the critical thinking itself. So it is applied to technology field and perhaps language usage field, but also thinking itself, as you said. And for example, my Institute of Translation Studies is housed with a faculty which is called the Faculty of Arts, Filozofická fakulta, philosophical faculty. So this shows you that we cherish the applied aspect, but at the same time, we are part of a Faculty of Arts philosophical faculty, and it's the critical thinking that I think we really should maintain and highlight in our students and future graduates.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Thomas.
Something that continues what George said. Apparently, the idea that I receive now is that UN is looking for a translator who is able to think, and the European Commission is looking for a translator, a practitioner. This is what I got. And a question is how DGT defines what it means by computational linguistics, because it's a huge sector, and a sector that works for the last 30 years, in EU also with the programs since 90s, but how they define computational linguistics and what they are expecting for computational linguistics. Thank you.
My answer will be a brief one here. I don't have the details. I only was able to compare the framework with its rather brief notions, and there was no detailed descriptions of the individual areas. So I don't have the details, sorry.
Anything else? Yes, please. Κύριος Χαράς, μικρόφωνο του κύριου.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Thomas, for the very inspiring talk. I know your focus was on technology, but as an interculturalist, I just wanted to ask you, has there been a shift in the importance that is placed on the intercultural part of the translators training? Thank you.
Thank you. When comparing, you mean the ENT framework? When comparing the framework, the intercultural aspect was one that was changed the least. There were very tiny changes in this area.
Do you agree with that? Do you agree with that? This is like change?
I think it's an attestation to the fact that the 2017 version was already very well elaborated. I think you can expect that in a really dynamically developing area such as technology, we could see some more development, more profound changes, but again, what we saw was not too much of a dramatic change, but still intercultural communication is a substantial part, such as what the ENT reference framework refers to as translation competence or translation chapter. So these chapters were not very much affected.
Okay, thank you very much. Συγγνώμη. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Έχουμε ένα διάλειμμα για καφέ, έχουμε καθυστερήσει λιγάκι, οπότε 1 τέταρτο για να επιστρέψουμε στις 11. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ.